Now moving on to the next section here, which is implementation of conditional access. Now, before I do that, I would want one more thing that you all should do. So here, you all can go to your Azure Active Directory. Within Azure Active Directory, go to the licenses section. Have you with me? So if you have a free trial subscription that you'll have created, or pay-as-you-go model, from here you can get a free trial. Can you see this? Get a free trial of your Azure AD Premium P2. Under licenses section, get free trial. I will recommend, if you are using a pay-as-you-go model and not using a free trial, don't try this, because this will involve cost. Okay, if you are using a free trial subscription that you have created, try this out. You can go ahead and get a free trial over here for a month. Is everyone getting me? So if you go to your default directory, go to licenses. Within licenses, get a free trial and click on activate. If you are using a free trial, it will be available only for 30 days. Okay. After 30 days, anyways, that account will be disabled, right? So once you activate this, lot of features which are disabled for you right now, in terms of identity protection or conditional access, they will get enabled for you. Okay, so while this gets activated, let's proceed further to the next important feature of Azure Active Directory, which is conditional access. So in terms of conditional access, this is very much similar to what we discussed earlier, but once it comes to identity protection, this is more in terms of change in terms of behavior or whatever risk that you are seeing over here. User risk, accessibility risk. Now, second thing that you see over here is conditional access. So when do you want conditional access for your users, right? So conditional access, if you see, is making sure that people are able to access the contents or access resources from wherever they want, but at the same time also protect the organization critical information, critical details that we have, right? So here what you can do is we can specify, depending upon number of parameters, that who is the user, where is it user accessing from, which device the user is accessing from, which range of IP addresses the person is accessing from, right? So based on those signals, based on those information that you get, you can take a decision whether you want to allow full access to the user, you want to allow limited access, you want to block access, you want to ask for multi-factor authentication, right? So the user would remain the same, but depending upon how you are logging in from, the access to the same resource will change. Let me give you another, let me give you a scenario here. So there is a device shared by the organization, and you also have your home PC, right? So while you are accessing from the device given by the organization, there will be certain set of rules that will be enforced on that. Correct? So some of these things will be accessible to you. Some of these things will not be accessible to you. Okay, but those will be governed by the organization policy. Meanwhile, if you try to use your home device, home tab or a desktop or a laptop, lot of things will be disabled for you. None of these things will be enabled. You only can read that information, but you can't modify or change that details. Are you getting it? That is referred as limited access. So depending upon the device, the user remains the same. Based on the device that you log in from, based on that, lot of the information which is generally available has now become disabled. That is what is referred as conditional access. So if you check for these options, which I mentioned earlier, so user and locations, devices, applications, and real-time risk. So these are some of the signals that one needs to capture, right? Based on that, based on the signals being received, take your decision over here. Now the question that everybody would ask is, isn't it something similar that we mentioned yesterday, mentioned in the earlier part as well, which is in terms of identity protection? So guys, once it comes to identity protection, the risk that we are referring to, the risk is being defined by Microsoft Azure itself, whether it is a risk or not. So some of these things are implicit once it comes to risks. Whereas conditional access concerned, this is something that we govern. We in sense as a um, Azure Active Directory administrator, we have to specify what signals we want to capture, what devices that we want to map. So some of these properties and attributes we will have to configure over here. That's the difference over here. So if I mention this in a programmatic manner, so this is more like a if condition, whereas identity protection is more like a else condition. So this is something which is a known thing for me. So I can mention these values over here, specify 1, 2, 3, 4, how many conditions I want, and specify what is the access permissions. Whereas else condition, which means if you are not able to capture those details yourself, you're not able to identify those things yourself, let Microsoft capture it as a risk and then perform the actions which is being mentioned. So what it checks is, has the user specified something on their own? If no, only then I'll go to identity protection. Or if there are so many hack attempts, there are so many new things which is happening on day-to-day basis in the industry, which as administrators we will not be aware about. But Microsoft team behind the scene, they would have captured it as a threat. So they will put it in the risk category. So Microsoft has so many customers. So even if one of their million customers who have been hacked or been through a situation, they will put it in the threat category for all other users. All authentications which are going through Azure Active Directory, all of them will have same set of rules. So see, as far as Azure Active Directory is concerned, how do we reach this Azure Active Directory? So what you would do is you would first launch the application, right? So you go to portal.azure.com or you'll go to your office365.com, right? Or you'll go to any of your services that you are accessing. Now, when you try accessing that service, it will check whether you have permissions or not. So if you don't have permission, then it will launch the login screen, which means when you are entering your login details, you already have requested for an application, and that application information is there. So that way it comes to know that this particular user is trying to access a given application. If you directly go to login.microsoft.com, in that scenarios, it will not know it, at which application you are accessing. See, generally how the user works. The user will work saying that I'll first go to that application, I'll go to my browser, I'll mention the website URL or the service URL. When I try accessing that service, then it'll ask for login. Say when you try to go to mail.outlook.com, right? Then ask for login, which means you are attempting to access the mail is known to that environment. It is there as part of your URL. So it captures from there. If you have a desktop application, in desktop application, this will not happen. In desktop application, the application already installed. So when you try to do a reconnect or you try to do a refresh, then it will connect to that service. So here, if you see, this is something which I was mentioning about group membership, IP location information, any devices that you are using to log in, right? What is the decision you want to take? Block access or grant access? If you look at the common applied policies over here, now some of these things which I mentioned about multi-factor authentication, you'll see it in the previous two steps. So if you see there is some device which is unknown or some location which is unknown, there you would say I want to allow the user to sign in, but I want to just reconfirm whether it is the same user by asking for multi-factor authentication. If I see a risky sign-in behavior, I would want to block that access. Can you see the last one? Requiring organization manage devices for specific application. So if you are accessing it from a home laptop or home PC, I will completely block that content. Maybe your kid is using that, or somebody by mistake may have logged into that application, which is very much possible. So by using these mechanisms, I can enforce or ensure conditional access to my environment. So let me go to the next section over here. Multi-factor authentication and conditional access. I'm sorry, in my case, it has failed to activate. Just give me a moment. I have previously created Azure Active Directories. Let me check if any one of them has a premium license. So in my case, I have one of them here. Let me first go to identity protection. So in terms of identity protection, so here you'll see all of them are enabled for me because this particular tenant that I'm using. Can you see this? So it says you want to assign a user risk policy. So for user risk policy, you want to assign it to all the groups. You want to assign it to a specific user. You can mention that over here. If you want to have any exemptions, you can mention which user is exempted from this. So there is a user risk. What do you want to do? So what is the kind of user risk that you are seeing for a given user? Say there is a user 1, user 2, user 3. So user 3 has complained that my account has been my account is being hacked. So you can map it as high user risk over here, right? Now, what is the policy that you want to do you want to enforce a policy here? You can do that. You can ask for a password change, require a password change. You can block access or allow access over here for those set of users or groups. So it's simply saying if there is any such challenge or any such problem with that identity, just go and block access or allow access with a password change. Second risk that you see is a sign-in risk. Same way, so you can specify you are signing from a unknown browser or signing from an unknown application. In those scenarios, that's a sign-in risk. In that scenario, how do you want to configure it? So you want to block that sign-in. So I don't want to block the user or change password for the user, but I want to block that sign-in process. The session connectivity should not happen. That thing I can block in sign-in risk. Okay. So here you'll see it is, that's why I said this is an else level, because as an administrator, I don't get a lot of things to do over here. Meanwhile, if I go to the second member over here, what was the second member that we discussed? We mentioned about conditional access policy, Azure AD conditional access. Now here, you'll be able to see more set of control for yourself as an administrator. Can you see this? So here, in terms of users and groups, I want to apply it for all the users. Now there was a question, how do you check for the applications here? So can you see this? All cloud applications. That's why I said these are applicable for web applications, not for desktop application. So I'm not sure who asked that question, but is that getting clear now? All cloud applications, selected applications. So here I can see selected applications, my apps, my staff, Outlook groups, Skype for business, your Microsoft Azure management administrator, Microsoft Azure management, which is your Azure portal. So if you access other applications, I'm okay. But if you access the Azure portal from an unknown location, unknown device, I see that as a threat. Okay. So when you say identity protection, I already mentioned about. So somebody who's a global admin is in high risk. You are protecting that identity. So whichever user is a global admin, global reader, these are high risk users. You need to protect their identities. So who's high risk? You know that. Microsoft will not decide that. But what is the condition for high risk? That Microsoft will decide. So just let me give one more example here. You complain to a bank saying that my card is lost. My debit card or my credit card is lost. So the moment that happens, what does the bank do? The bank will put that user into a high risk, right? Saying that this user has lost his or her card. That's how you put a high risk. So that user and all accesses by that user are at high risk. So it's the same way that we are doing over here. So you want to apply it for all the users, cloud applications. What is the conditions that you want to mention, right? So to mention the condition of sign-in risk, high risk, as far as device platforms are concerned, as far as device platforms are concerned, you can map it to a specific device. So if the information, if the request is coming from Android, iOS, or Mac environment, I can map them as risk. If you want to map for a specific location, so certain locations which I'm mentioning over here, these locations I want to map as a risk. So you decide which of these members or which of these options are relevant for you. Right? So these things we can configure over here. What kind of client applications you want to allow access. So this is where we can specify the conditions. That's why I said these are more like if-else conditions. You can specify your conditions over here. What conditions you want to map. I'm not sure why it's not showing about the location. Okay, here I did not mention it. Configure yes. Selected locations. So you can mention your location names over here. Location names, MFA trusted IPs. So you decide what is the location that you want to configure. What is the device state that you have? Not just about the device, but if even that device has the latest patches or not, security patches or not, you can verify for that as well. Right? So once these conditions are satisfied, then what do you want to do? You want to block access? You want to grant access? Grant access using multi-factor authentication, grant access using a password change. How do you do grant access? So like somebody asked a very right question, that if the user is traveling across the world and he or she keeps signing from different locations, different devices, every time, please give me a multi-factor authentication. Give me the OTP details or use a authenticator app to verify that you are a valid user. So that is not a problem for me. I just have to mention that over here in the conditional access. Identity protection has no conditions. It is something which is dependent on Microsoft. What is the policies that they are using behind the scene? Secondly, it is specifically for certain identities, which is global administrator, global reader, right? For those set of identities or specialized identities, we make identity protection enabled. Now, please be careful. Both the features which I have discussed right now, one is identity protection, and second is conditional access. Both of these are part of your Azure Active Directory Premium P2 license. So you have to first get this license, free trial, and then you can try for these members. Then you can try for these features over here. One of the easier ways of doing this would be, like I showed you, you can go to licenses, or the way how I have done it. You can go ahead and create a new tenant over here. Okay, you can create a new tenant over here, and inside this new tenant, you can go ahead and specify licenses. That's how I have done it. So in this tenant, if you see, I don't have my Azure subscription. In this tenant, I don't have my Azure subscription. I'm using it only for Azure Active Directory Premium. So if that 1 month time period is being expired, right? What I can do is I can go back to, I can create a new tenant, one more tenant, and then enable this license over there. Now this is from a learning perspective, learning and implementation perspective. In real world scenarios, you'll have to purchase this license for your subscription, associate that with your respective users. And for every user that you assign Premium P2, you'll have a charge for it. So if you go to the pricing section for Azure Active Directory, so per user it is $9 per month. So how many users you are assigning that license? Like how you have Office 365 licenses, right? Same way. So P1 is $6 per user per month, and Azure Premium P2 is $9 per user per month. So how many users you want to assign that license is up to you. If I allow access to a user, any user who is part of Azure Active Directory, that person will have access, and just access doesn't have any cost associated with it. User can access or log in into the environment. Access is another thing. User can log in successfully. So for login, there is no cost. If you want additional features like identity protection, additional features like conditional access, then you'll have to use the right kind of license for it. And that license will have a cost. So if you get into a user specific scenario, do you already have Office 365? Are you using Microsoft Intune or any other Microsoft services? If yes, which means you already have Azure Active Directory. If no, in that case, you'll have to purchase your Azure subscription, pay as you go model. And once you purchase Azure subscription, you by default get Azure Active Directory free trial over there. Azure Active Directory is free trial, and it's for all the users that you register inside your Azure Active Directory. Now, there are specific users with specific permissions, and you want more features for given users. In that scenario, you go ahead, add new licenses for P1, P2, and assign it to the user. So you want it for one user, you want it for 3, 4 users, 4 users. You assign that P1, P2 license for those users. Other users will still have the free trial license. That's why I showed all the 4 tiers over here. Free tier. So as far as accessibility is concerned, accessibility is no problem. For identity and access management, there is no problem. If you want premium features, then you have to go for P1 or P2, which is for admin stuff, 3 users, 4 users who are special users, special accounts.